At the class reunion, everyone still thought I was the same broke kid from college. My old rival had his arm around the girl I once had a crush on, bragging that he had to use his dad's connections just to book a table at this exclusive restaurant. Then, with a patronizing smile, he told me to eat as much as I wanted. I simply smiled and called over the manager. Tonight, everything in this private room is on the house. 25th of this month, the day of our 10-year college reunion. To my surprise, Aaron, our class president, had managed to find my number. He insisted over and over again that I had to come. George, it's been 10 years. You don't have to avoid everyone forever. It's okay if things haven't gone well for you, we all really want to see you. I sneered internally. I didn't argue with him. I just gave a non-committal agreement. After what happened back in college, I had cut ties with everyone. They probably all still thought I was unemployed, helping my dad sell vegetables at the market. The 25th turned out to be a rainy day. I arrived at the restaurant right on time and stepped into the largest, most luxurious private dining room. The moment I walked in, the lively chatter came to an abrupt halt. A dozen pairs of eyes snapped toward me. Some were filled with disdain. Some with amusement. Some were scrutinizing me, while others simply looked curious. It was just like back then, when they had all falsely accused me of being a thief. Aaron was the first to break the silence, his face lighting up. George. I was worried you wouldn't show. You're the last one here, was the traffic bad? I walked straight to an empty seat and shrugged. I wouldn't know. I walked. My office was just upstairs on the 3rd floor. It had taken me less than 2 minutes to get here. Terry, my old dorm mate, smirked. George, it's pouring outside. Why didn't you drive? Terry used to mock me relentlessly in college for coming from a poor family. Even an idiot could hear what he was implying. He was certain I didn't own a car. I took a sip of coffee. I live nearby. No need. This restaurant is in a prime location, right in the middle of the city. Yet quiet and secluded. But there aren't many residential areas nearby, Ryan commented. He was wearing black-framed glasses, his hair neatly combed, and dressed in a tailored black suit. A female classmate, dripping in jewelry, chimed in, the only residential area within 2 kilometers is Grandview Residences, east of here. You don't live there, do you? I recognized her. Becky. Back in college, every time she passed me in the hallway, she would wrinkle her nose in disgust. She used to complain to others. His family sells vegetables, he must stink all the time. Someone in the group chuckled and said, Becky, the apartments in Grandview are all at least 4,000 square feet, and the price per square foot is $2,000. Even your husband might not be able to afford one, let alone anyone else. Becky let out a short laugh. She looked at me, her gaze condescending. So, George, where exactly do you live? I found it amusing. I did own a place in Grandview Residences, but I only stayed there when my parents visited. Most of the time, I lived with my fiancée, Selena. 4-1. I didn't want her commuting across half the city just to see me after a long day at work. And 2, I liked the view from her place, a vast stretch of lake right outside the window. But because of Selena's unique profession, I had no intention of sharing any details about her with these people. So, I kept it simple. I live with my girlfriend. Several people burst into laughter, making no effort to hide it. George, after all these years, you're still the type to revolve around a woman? The voice came from across the table. I looked up and met the gaze of a man with sharp features. Dressed impeccably, exuding an effortless mix of elegance and arrogance. I narrowed my eyes. Henry. My rival for all 4 years of college. Henry came from a privileged background, his father was in politics, his mother in business. Their family had money, power, and prestige. On top of that, he was gifted in his own right, good-looking, academically strong, and an all-around athlete. He was the guy every girl in school had a crush on. Meanwhile, I was a broke kid who had to rely on scholarships and part-time jobs just to get through college. The only place I could compete with him was in academics. Henry couldn't stand the fact that I was always one step ahead of him when it came to grades. But that wasn't the only reason we were at odds. My gaze shifted to the woman sitting beside him, Emily. Even in her 30s, she was still breathtakingly beautiful. I pursued her for 3 years in college. Emily had been a campus beauty, the kind that turned heads wherever she went. I was just 18 when I started college. Young and easily smitten by a pretty face. Emily had so many admirers that they could have lined up around the track, twice. But being in the same class gave me an advantage. I shared my notes with her, highlighted key topics before exams, added her name to competition entries, even wrote her papers. I never minded. I did it all willingly. Because every time she smiled only at me. Or so I thought. Later I found out that during those days when I worked tirelessly for Emily, she had slept with Henry countless times. Henry, of course. Waited until graduation to drop the truth on me. He had relished the sight of me, completely shattered. Lost in thought, I pulled myself back to the present. The resentment I once harbored had long since faded into nothing. I glanced at the matching rings on their fingers and smiled. You two got married. Congratulations. George, you're a little late with that, someone chimed in. They already have 2 kids. Emily maintained the poised elegance of a wealthy wife, offering me a faint smile. Her composure was impeccable, as if she had never toyed with me for 3 years. So. You mentioned a girlfriend, she said lightly. Still not married? My girlfriend is still young. There's no rush. The mere mention of Selena softened me, and even my tone became gentler. Terry let out a derisive snort. Girls these days all say they're in no rush, but what they really mean is they're waiting for the highest bidder. Give her $1 million, and she'll come running to marry you. The others nodded in agreement, their gazes filled with even more disdain and mockery. I hadn't even been here for 5 minutes, and they had already decided I was a failure, no house, no car. Living off my girlfriend. It fit perfectly into the version of my life they wanted to believe in. Aaron poured drinks for everyone. When he reached me, he asked casually, So, George, where are you working now? A few people perked up, clearly listening intently. Years of doing business had sharpened my ability to read a room. They weren't just making conversation. They wanted to confirm their assumption, that I had gone back to selling vegetables with my dad. I run a small business, I said vaguely. Just then. The private room door swung open. A security guard I didn't recognize stepped inside and called out loudly, Excuse me, who owns the Lamborghini parked out front? Another guest accidentally scratched it and would like to settle the damage with the owner. The room instantly buzzed with chatter. Wow, which of us drives a Lamborghini? I raised my hand slightly. It's mine. My voice wasn't loud, but it silenced the room in an instant. Tell them not to worry about it. I added. It's hard to drive in the rain. No need to compensate me. The security guard was probably new. My Lamborghini had never been parked in front of the restaurant before, so it made sense he didn't recognize it. After nodding, he quietly shut the door behind him as he left. The silence in the room was suffocating. Everyone was staring at me as if they'd just seen a ghost. Then, the quiet was broken by the sound of slow, sarcastic applause. Borrow someone else's car, comma. George, Henry sneered through gritted teeth. I couldn't even be bothered to explain or argue. After years of grinding in the business world, I had long outgrown the reckless pride of the young man I once was. Henry's words seemed to ease the tension in the room. The others, whose faces had been twisted with disbelief, now looked a little more relaxed. Ryan shook his head at me. You better hope the real owner doesn't come looking for you. Before I could respond, the private room doors swung open again. 7 or 8 waitresses entered, carrying exquisitely plated dishes. Aaron raised his glass and stood up. Classmates, let me say a few words first. First, congratulations to all of us on our 10-year graduation anniversary, what a great reunion. Second, a big thank you to Henry for securing this amazing venue for our special gathering. We all get to enjoy a taste of the high life, thanks to him. Becky giggled. You're not kidding, this place is impossible to book. My husband managed to come here once, but after that, no matter how hard he tried, he just couldn't get a reservation. Henry looked pleased with himself. Grinning. It was nothing. My dad may be retired, but he still has some influence. Emily wore a perfectly poised smile, as if she shared in his glory. Then Henry turned to me, his tone dripping with condescension. George, you've probably never even heard of this place before. Everything here, the food, the drinks. The experience, it's all beyond anything you've ever seen in your life. So make sure to enjoy it while you can. I glanced at the table full of delicacies I'd long since grown tired of and said nothing. Any guest who managed to book a table here was either rich or powerful. Usually, the restaurant manager will come in person. Nate, the restaurant manager, was already used to seeing me dine with clients. After professionally inquiring about the food and service, he was about to leave. I stopped him. These are all my classmates. Tonight. Everything in this private room is on the house. My tone was so matter-of-fact that the entire table stared at me in disbelief. Nate hesitated, looking visibly troubled. This. I knew why he was hesitant. Since the day this restaurant opened, no guest had ever dined for free. The best anyone could hope for, even the most elite clients, was a 50% discount at most. And tonight's bill? It wouldn't be anything less than 6 figures. But to my classmates. Nate's hesitation looked like an awkward attempt to handle a drunken customer making ridiculous demands. I overheard Terry muttering to someone beside him. Is he out of his mind? Henry, unable to sit still any longer, shot me a glare before marching over to Nate with a forced smile. Mr. Nate, please don't take him seriously. Go ahead and take care of your other guests. With that, he practically ushered Nate out of the room himself. When Henry returned, his expression was stormy. He jabbed a finger at me, his voice low and furious. George. Mr. Nate only gave us this room as a favor to my father. Stop causing trouble. Becky scoffed, her voice dripping with mockery. Exactly. The cost of this meal is probably more than your entire annual salary. And yet here you are, pretending you can make it free? Who do you think you are? The room erupted into sneers and laughter. Just then, my phone screen lit up with a message from Luca. The vegetable shipment won't be delivered today. Ryan, who was sitting nearby, caught a glimpse of my screen. He snickered. I knew it. Still selling vegetables? Patting me on the shoulder. He feigned concern. Brother, look around you. This place, this decor, it's not some farmer's market where you can just hand out freebies like a sack of lettuce. I chuckled and said nothing. As the drinks kept flowing, people gradually lost interest in me. Satisfied with their assumption that I wasn't doing well, they finally turned their attention elsewhere. Becky suddenly asked Emily, I remember when you first graduated, didn't a talent scout approach you about acting in a TV drama? Emily glanced at Henry beside her and smiled. It's not that easy. You can't become famous overnight. Becky shook her head. Come on, you were so young and beautiful back then. How could it not be possible? Henry took Emily's hand and spoke with the overbearing tone of a traditionalist. My wife doesn't need to be out in the public eye. Her place is at home, taking care of the family. For a brief second, Emily's smile stiffened, but she quickly masked it. I knew that back in college, Emily had desperately wanted to break into the entertainment industry. With her looks and figure. She had even gained some fame online. But after she and Henry went public, she gradually stopped posting on social media. Then, out of nowhere, she turned to me. George, what does your girlfriend do? She's an artist. That was my usual way of describing it. Painting? Screenwriting? Or something else? Just then, my phone rang. It was Selena. George, are you busy? Not at all. What's up? The award ceremony starts in an hour. I'm a little nervous. Take a deep breath. You've got this. Do you think I have a chance? Of course. You've won over so many people with your performance. I was playing an ugly character the entire time. I'm not sure if it looked real enough. It was as real as it gets. In fact, I think the scene where you were tightening the bolts was the most beautiful. You looked like a natural. I teased her on purpose, hoping to ease her nerves. She burst out laughing. I thought so too. Thanks, George, I feel a lot better now. I have to go, the director's calling me. Alright, bye. As I hung up, I noticed that the room had gone silent. Everyone was staring at me again. Tightening bolts? Becky was the first to react. Suspicious at first, she then erupted into sharp, piercing laughter that filled the entire room. George, so your girlfriend is a repairman? Becky's words sent a wave of amused contempt through the room. Terry doubled over in laughter. George, you graduated from a top university, and you ended up with a repairman? Did she even finish high school? The room burst into jeering. A vegetable seller and a bolt tightener, what a perfect match. Henry scoffed under his breath, shaking his head. Emily didn't laugh as loudly as the others. She simply tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. But I didn't miss the faint smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. Someone pretended to be serious and said to me, "Hey, my dad's car factory is hiring right now. The pay is way above the city's average, and they provide free meals and accommodation. George, why don't you bring your little girlfriend along?" Ha ha ha. I lowered my gaze, not wanting them to see the pity in my eyes. 10 years had passed. And they were still just as insufferable as before. Because of me, the private room remained lively, filled with endless mockery and laughter. Eventually, they laughed themselves out. Then, a male classmate, who had only just noticed the car keys Henry had casually placed on the table, suddenly spoke up in a flattering tone. "Henry, when did you get a new car?" "A Mercedes. I bought it months ago." "Just another car for the collection," Henry said casually. "I heard you upgraded to a bigger house last month. When are you inviting us over for a tour?" Henry shot me a fleeting glance. Clearly enjoying himself. "You're welcome anytime." Becky, who had always been the class gossip, couldn't hold back her excitement. "Henry and Emily bought a house in our neighborhood, it cost $1 million. A wave of admiration swept through the room. Emily gave a modest smile. "Becky, that means we'll be neighbors now. If you ask me, living like Henry is the ultimate goal in life." Henry waved his hand, feigning humility. "Exactly. A mansion, luxury cars, a beautiful wife, he's got it all. We can only dream of that kind of life." Henry sighed dramatically. "If I had a little more money, I'd have bought a place in Grandview Residences instead. That's where Emily and I really wanted to live." The room exploded with even more flattery. Just then, the security guard from earlier knocked and stepped inside. He approached me respectfully. "Sir, your parking spot isn't ideal, it almost got scratched again. Would you like me to move it to a safer location? You can hand me your keys, and I'll take care of it." I hadn't even responded when Terry burst into laughter. "George, quick. Give the man your keys," he said between chuckles. The others all wore smug, expectant expressions, waiting for the joke to play out. Aaron smiled apologetically. "Sorry, our friend here has had too much to drink, he was just joking about the car." But before he could finish his sentence, it was as if someone had pressed a pause button on the entire room. Because I had pulled out my car keys. A distinct design, one that anyone with half a brain would recognize. A Lamborghini key. The security guard took it without hesitation. "Thank you, sir. I'll park it properly for you. George, that car is really yours?" Terry's eyes were bulging. The loudest voices from earlier had all fallen completely silent. Their mouths hung open, looking at each other in stunned disbelief. Becky, her expression full of suspicion, scanned me up and down as if seeing me for the first time. Henry's brows were knitted tightly together. Just as he was about to speak, Ryan suddenly shouted, his voice sharp and urgent. "George! What's that?" I followed his gaze. On the floor, near my feet, was a folded slip of paper that must have fallen out when I pulled out my keys. Even though half of it was folded over. Words were clearly visible at the top. "Luxury car rental." Aha! So it's rented. Ryan pounced on the paper like he had just discovered a goldmine, eagerly snatching it off the floor. I didn't particularly care if he saw it, but I wasn't about to let him get a good look at the details. There were names and addresses on there that weren't mine. Before he could unfold it, I swiftly plucked it from his hand. "Sorry, I rented it for a friend. Some of the information is private." That part was true. My friend wanted 50 identical Bentley models for his wedding. But he was still short by 10. I had taken care of that for him. Of course, I had no intention of explaining. And even if I did, Ryan wouldn't believe me. Neither would the others. This time, however, they didn't mock me as they had before. Instead, they looked at me with pity. Like I was some kind of sad, pathetic fool desperately trying to impress them. "George, aren't you tired of pretending all night? We're all classmates here. We know your background. Was this really necessary?" Henry exhaled, looking more at ease now. His voice was slow, deliberate, and laced with amusement. "Every single person in this room remembers exactly what you did back in college." Emily lightly touched Henry's arm. Hearing him bring up the past, I should have been angry. But instead, I just looked at him quietly. I even smiled. Maybe my reaction irritated him. "What, can't talk about it?" Henry's voice suddenly rose. "Who was it that lost the $10,000 we raised for Marcus?" The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to me. Even after all these years. They still believed I had stolen the money meant for Marcus. Marcus, my only true friend in college. During our senior year, he was diagnosed with cancer. His family was even poorer than mine. His parents had both lost the ability to work due to an accident, and his younger brother was intellectually disabled. When the class found out, our tutor organized a donation drive. I was the one assigned to deliver the money to Marcus. To help him as much as I could, I spent my days attending classes and my nights working shifts. That day, on my way to the hospital, exhaustion finally got the better of me. I dozed off for a few minutes on the bus. When I woke up, the money was gone. Faced with my classmates' accusations and insults, I had no way to defend myself. Only Marcus believed me. "George, if the money's gone, then it's gone. I don't blame you. I'm terminal. Whether it's $10,000 or $100,000, it wouldn't change the outcome." I sat by his hospital bed, tears streaming down my face. Unable to say a single word. I wished he would just curse at me. Hit me. But I feel bad for my parents. I was so close to graduating and finally being able to take care of them. And I worry about my little brother. What'll happen to him when they grow old? Marcus cried. Back then, I was so desperate for money that I considered everything. Blood donation, sperm donation, high-interest loans, even robbery. Every day, I endured my classmates' taunts and scorn while racking my brain for ways to get Marcus the money. Eventually, I broke down and called my father. He didn't ask any questions. He simply told me to focus on my studies. The next day, $15,000 appeared in my bank account. Dad sent a text, $10,000 to replace the donation. The extra $5,000 is from our family, just for Marcus. I had no idea how he managed to pull together such a huge sum, but I knew one thing, $15,000 was a fortune for us. Even after I made up for the lost donations out of my own pocket, my classmates still insulted me maliciously. He caved under the weight of our righteous judgment and returned what he stole. And in the end, Marcus didn't make it. He passed away before we even graduated. Someone leaked the accusation to the company that had already sent me an offer letter. My job was gone before I could even start. With no immediate prospects and my grandmother falling gravely ill, I had no choice but to return home. That's when the class started spreading rumors that I had gone back to selling vegetables with my dad. I left the group chat. Changed my number. Cut them out of my life completely. Coming back to the present, I looked at Henry and said calmly, "You've been slandering me for years. Don't you think it's time to let it go? My bond with Marcus is something none of you could ever understand." Henry threw his head back and laughed, as if he'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. "Bond? If you really cared so much, then tell me, have you been taking care of his parents? Have you been supporting his idiot brother? No? Then cut the act." I stayed silent, unfazed by his outburst. Just then, my phone rang again. It was Luca. Luca was great at his job, but if there was one flaw that got on my nerves, it was his volume. "Sir. The property fees and utility bills for your Grandview Residences home have all been taken care of. I also hired 4 cleaners to do a thorough deep clean. Your parents can move in as soon as they arrive tomorrow." I had to hold the phone away from my ear before he shattered my eardrum. "Got it. Also, pick up a bouquet for me. And come to the restaurant later, I'll need a driver, I've been drinking. No matter what the results of the award ceremony were, I plan to celebrate with Selena tonight." "Yes, sir. No problem." I ended the call. Becky rolled her eyes dramatically. "Did you all hear that?" she scoffed. "George is really laying it on thick tonight. We just talked about how expensive Grandview Residences is, and boom, his assistant conveniently calls to make sure we all know he owns a place there." Someone shouted, "Hey, since tonight is Oscar night, George, you should win Best Actor for this performance." The moment those words left his mouth, a female classmate suddenly gasped, eyes glued to her phone. "You guys, look at the trending news." She practically shrieked. Selena just won the Oscar for Best Actress, and she announced her engagement on stage. What? I froze. Grabbing my phone, I opened social media. The trending page was flooded with headlines. Selena's acceptance speech, she just announced her engagement. Who is Mr. Morgan? Selena wins the Academy Award for Best Actress. The man behind Selena, who is? I had expected her win to cause a media frenzy, but I never expected to be part of it. Clicking on the top-ranked video, I watched as Selena took the stage in a floor-length gown, holding her Academy Award for Best Actress in her hands. She beamed as she spoke into the mic, knowing that I'll soon be marrying Mr. Morgan. I think that's one of the happiest things in my life. A warmth spread through my chest. For a woman at the peak of her career, publicly announcing her engagement was no small decision. I had always been careful not to draw too much attention to our relationship. I didn't want to affect her career. But she had never once wanted to hide it. "George, this isn't fair to you," she had told me before. "We're in a real relationship, we should be able to be open about it. At the very least, I should be able to tell the world that I have a boyfriend." And now, under the brightest spotlight of her career, she had done exactly what she had always wanted to do. The room was buzzing with excitement. Wow, Selena is so bold. I wonder who this Mr. Morgan is? Let me think, which male celebrities have the last name Morgan? I was still processing everything when a smile crept onto my lips, both at Selena's victory and at the thought of what she had just done. Across the table, Becky squinted at me suspiciously. "George, what the hell are you smiling about? You look like you actually think Selena was talking about you." Terry's comment sent another round of laughter through the room. I was already eager to congratulate Selena in person. Checking the time, I saw that Luca should be arriving any moment. Calmly, I got up to excuse myself. Aaron grabbed my arm to stop me. "What's the rush?" We all agreed, no one leaves until we're drunk. The room was bustling, some people were heading to the restroom, others were taking calls, and the door was swinging open and shut. Through the movement, I spotted Luca peeking in from outside. I gestured for him to wait a moment. Aaron followed my gaze and suddenly froze, eyes wide in recognition. "Wait a second. Aren't you?" He snapped his fingers, then slapped his thigh. "You're Marcus's little brother, Luca, right?" Someone frowned. "Aaron, you must be mistaken. What would Marcus's brother be doing here?" But Aaron was adamant. "No. I'm sure of it. They both have the same mole on their faces. I remember it clearly." Luca bore a striking resemblance to Marcus, and both of them had a small, distinctive black mole on their cheekbones. After Marcus passed, Luca had come to collect his brother's belongings from their dorm. That was the last time Aaron had seen him. Aaron pulled Luca into the room. "Luca, what are you doing here?" Luca hadn't expected to run into Marcus's former classmates. He scratched the back of his head and grinned sheepishly. "I'm here to see Mr. Morgan." Aaron pressed further. "How have you and your parents been? It's been so many years, how's your family doing?" "They're doing great. Mr. Morgan has been taking care of us all these years. My parents live in a nursing home now, and they're happier than ever." The entire room turned to stare at me in stunned silence. Just moments ago, Henry had grilled me about not taking responsibility for Marcus's family. But I had. For 10 years. Luca wasn't as slow as people made him out to be. He wasn't as sharp as most, sure, but he was kind and sincere, just like his brother. And he depended on me. I had kept him by my side all these years, raising him like my own brother. Substitute Marcus taking on the responsibility of a son and an older sibling, for 10 years straight. That wasn't something just anyone could do. For the first time that night, no one had a snide remark to make. Even Becky and Terry, the two most vocal critics, had nothing to say. Only Emily spoke, her voice softer than usual. "George, you really were a good friend to Marcus." I didn't respond. Luca was here, and I was ready to leave. This time, no one tried to stop me. But just as I stepped out the door, I nearly collided with someone coming in. "Ben Smith. Over here." Becky leapt up excitedly, waving at the newcomer. The man, Ben Smith, barely acknowledged her. Instead, his face lit up in surprise when he saw me. "Mr. Morgan. What a coincidence." I shook his hand. "Mr. Smith. Ben Smith and I had only met last week when he came to the restaurant with a few friends. My wife and her classmates are having a reunion. Why don't we sit down and have a couple of drinks together? We didn't enjoy it enough last time." I was about to decline when Becky rushed over and clung to Ben's arm. Confused, she asked, "Ben, how do you know George? I've never introduced you to." Ben, oblivious to the tension in her voice, laughed. "Oh, we met at the restaurant. Mr. Morgan, that Lamborghini outside, isn't that the one you just bought?" Small world. My friend was there the day you picked it up, and when he told me about it, I had a feeling it was you. Ben was a talker. He turned back to Becky and added, Becky, isn't Grandview Residences the place you and your best friend were obsessed with? We couldn't afford it, but Mr. Morgan didn't even hesitate, he just bought a unit right away. As he spoke, he gave me an approving thumbs up. Becky's pupils dilated as she stared at me, utterly frozen in disbelief. I smiled and added, Mr. Smith is not an actor I hired. Ben glanced at me, then at Becky, then at the room full of stunned, speechless faces. An actor? What actor? A brief silence fell over the room. Becky shook Ben's arm. Ben, you're saying him, she pointed at me. Not only does he own a Lamborghini, but he also bought a house in Grandview Residences? That's right. You sure you're not mistaking him for someone else? Becky, come on. I might mix up other people, but I would never mistake Mr. Morgan, of all people. Terry still refused to believe it. That's impossible. You couldn't even land a job after graduation. How the hell, yeah, I said calmly. And if it weren't for you making sure I lost my job offer back then, who knows how things would have turned out? Terry's face paled. How do you know? I had known for years. The person who stabbed me in the back and cost me my first job had been him all along. As my classmates slowly recovered from their shock, whispers erupted throughout the room. Holy shit. The car, the house, does he really own them? I still don't believe it. There's no way. Ben's loaded, though, he wouldn't be mistaken. And he wouldn't team up with George to pull some prank on us. Unless George robbed a bank. How the hell is he this rich? Maybe he won the lottery? But this time, the looks they gave me were different. No longer filled with contempt or disdain, only curiosity and scrutiny. Ben, listening to their comments, looked even more confused. Becky, he said slowly, who exactly were they calling poor? Mr. Morgan? Becky didn't answer. Instead, she asked, Ben, you say he drives a luxury car and owns a mansion, but do you even know who he is? How could he possibly afford all that? Ben let out an exasperated sigh. Are you serious? Morgan is the owner of this restaurant. He runs dozens of high-end restaurants, invests in real estate, film, hospitality, he's worth more than all of you combined. Why wouldn't he be able to afford a house? Stop embarrassing yourself. I watched as Becky's jaw went slack, hanging open like it had dislocated. With a clatter, Aaron's wine glass slipped from his hand, spilling all over himself. Terry looked like his eyeballs were about to pop out of their sockets. Emily clasped both hands over her mouth. Henry's face turned a deep shade of purple, like a piece of raw liver. Holy shit. Ryan stammered, his voice trembling with excitement. Guys, did I hear that right? George is the owner of this place? Henry let out a low, eerie chuckle. Well, he sneered. Quite the hidden ace up your sleeve, huh? So this whole evening, pretend to be poor, was just your way of messing with us, Mr. Morgan? He practically spat out my name. I chuckled. Hardly. I'm not that petty. Besides, I never actually pretended to be poor. The moment I arrived, I had openly told the manager to waive the bill. They were the ones who refused to believe it. I had no obligation to explain myself. Ben, watching the drama unfold, couldn't hold back his laughter. So let me get this straight, Mr. Morgan sat here drinking with you guys all night, and you had no idea who he was? I patted his shoulder, deciding to clear things up for him. They really didn't know. This is just a college reunion. Ben's eyes lit up. Oh. So Mr. Morgan and Becky were college classmates? What a coincidence. I didn't have the patience to continue entertaining them. Let's talk another time, I told Ben before turning to Henry. I'll let Nate know once more, tonight's bill is free. There are plenty of entertainment options in the restaurant. Take your time and enjoy. As for me, I won't be staying to keep you company. With that, I turned and walked out, leaving them in stunned silence. Henry clenched his jaw, gripping his glass so tightly his knuckles turned white. He couldn't say a word. Aaron called my name. But I ignored him and walked straight out. By the time Luca pulled up in front of Selena's building, I took out my phone, intending to ask when she'd be home. Instead, the first thing I saw was a message from Aaron. Mr. Morgan, I added you to our class group chat. Let's stay in touch from now on. I opened the chat. A flood of messages, all tagging me. Every single one was praising me. Back in college, Mr. Morgan was always ranked first in every subject. Whenever he joined a competition, he only ever won gold. I always knew he wasn't just some ordinary guy. And he made it all on his own. Everything he has today, he earned with real skill. Even Terry, who had mocked me the loudest last night, was now spamming the chat with approving emojis. The sudden shift in their attitudes was staggering. It was as if the same people who had sneered and ridiculed me just hours ago had never done so at all. The only ones who remained silent were Henry and Emily. I noticed several new friend requests, all from people in the group. One of them was from Emily. George. Accept my request. But something about her off. Like a goddess descending from her pedestal to grant a mere mortal the privilege of getting close. I turned off my phone. I had no interest in any of them. The next day, the buzz from last night still hadn't died down. I briefly wondered if it would affect Selena, but she only laughed and told me not to worry. I'm just an actress, George. My life is meant to be open. As long as my work speaks for itself, I don't need to care what others think. Then, her agent called. Selena. The paparazzi caught you with your boyfriend. They're demanding $10 million, or they'll expose him. Selena's expression darkened instantly. I reached out, trying to calm her. $10 million is nothing. We can afford it. It's not about the money, she snapped. I just hate being blackmailed by paparazzi. So many people are scared of them, but the more they give in, the more these vultures push their limits. Determination flashed in her eyes as she pulled out her phone and opened her social media. Then, she glanced up at me. George, if the whole world finds out that you're my fiancé, will that bother you? I smiled. Brushing her hair back. Not at all. Her lips curved into a grin. Good. And just like that, 1 minute later, the internet exploded. My phone began ringing non-stop. Selena didn't post an explanation. No long-winded statement. Just a single photo of the two of us together. And just like that, the whole world knew who Morgan really was. He looks so normal. There's no way he's ordinary. Selena wouldn't fall for just anyone. Honestly, based on their ages and appearance, they actually look great together. Neither of us had any work scheduled that day. So we shut off our phones. Went to my house, and spent a rare, peaceful day with my parents. The next morning, the moment I powered my phone back on, Luca's call came through. He sounded furious. Mr. Morgan, check what I just sent you. Someone is deliberately smearing Miss Selena. I opened my social media app and saw a message from Luca. He had sent me a link. The article went to great lengths to smear Selena, claiming she had started out as a bar girl. It also featured a series of photos from an unknown source, alleging that after entering the industry, she had seduced directors and producers, sleeping with countless men to land her Oscar for Best Actress. I clicked on one of the photos. It was indeed Selena. Bathed in soft pink lighting, her back was completely exposed. A man in his 50s was touching her smooth skin, leaning in close to whisper something in her ear. It only took me a second to decide, I needed to show this to Selena. I should have known the day would come when people start throwing dirt at me, Selena scoffed, though her eyes burned with anger. The price of fame, I suppose. She took a deep breath. Then looked at me. But you showing me this means you believe me. That's enough. I took her hand firmly. It's not enough if only I believe you. Your fans, the public, they need to know the truth. She thought for a moment before saying, remember that art film I shot last year? That was the director explaining a scene, demonstrating a movement for my co-star. I nodded. That was all I needed to hear. I kissed her gently and smiled. All right. Get some rest. I'll take care of everything, you don't have to worry about a thing. Without wasting time, I reached out to the film's director and crew members, while also tracing the source of the article. The internet moves fast. Within hours, Selena had gone from being the celebrated Oscar-winning actress who made history with Morgan to being painted as a scheming social climber who used her body to get ahead. Fortunately, the people I contacted were efficient. They quickly identified the original source of the slanderous article. Meanwhile, the film crew responded with supporting evidence. The director of Selena's art film posted a statement on social media. Selena is one of the most dedicated actors I've ever worked with. Her passion for the craft is truly inspiring. It's a shame this film has yet to be released, but every actor and crew member involved made an unforgettable contribution. Alongside his statement, he shared a photo, one taken at the same moment as the incriminating image, but from a different angle. This time, the entire set was visible. The cinematographer, lighting technicians, makeup artists, everyone was there. Only a fool wouldn't see the truth. One by one, other crew members stepped forward, posting testimonies, behind-the-scenes clips, and additional proof. Selena's fans wasted no time. Armed with solid evidence, they fiercely defended her, flooding social media with posts that drowned out the hate. I opened my college group chat. The message feed was chaotic. Yesterday, it had been filled with shock, admiration, and excitement when Selena and I went public. This morning, after the article surfaced, the tone had shifted, skepticism, gossip, and heated debate. Among the chatter, Henry had chimed in with a few smug, backhanded remarks. Clearly enjoying the scandal. I read his words with icy detachment. Then, without hesitation, I dropped the evidence into the chat and tagged Emily. The group exploded once again. I had obtained the chat records, every single message. It was Emily. She had orchestrated the smear campaign against Selena, collecting damaging material and deliberately leaking it online, then hiring people to amplify the scandal. I had no idea why she did it. Was it because I never accepted her so-called favor and ignored her friend request? It had been 10 years since we last spoke, there was no reason to reconnect now. Was it jealousy toward Selena? But the two of them had never even met. Whatever her reasons, I wasn't going to let this slide. I wouldn't stand by and allow her to hurt Selena. Anyone here familiar with the law? In this situation, what legal action can my fiancée Selena take? After sending that message to the group chat, I exited without waiting for a response. Half an hour later, Aaron, our class president, sent me a video. In the clip, Henry looked furious and reluctant. But he still forced out an apology to me. Then he added that Emily was scared out of her mind. She was pregnant with her third child and couldn't handle the stress. They hoped I could be magnanimous and let this go. They were even willing to offer financial compensation. I showed the evidence and the video to Selena. She frowned. This Emily, she's the girl you had a crush on in college, isn't she? Feeling a little embarrassed, I nodded. Good thing she never liked you back. Could you imagine being with someone like her? I shook my head. Selena, what do you want to do? She sighed. She's pregnant. If we go too hard on her, the narrative could turn against us. Forget it. Just have her post a public apology video. I relayed Selena's words to Aaron, who passed them on to Henry. At first, Henry refused. But I wasn't backing down. They could insult me all they wanted, but dragging Selena into this? That was unacceptable. I made it clear that even if Selena chose to forgive Emily, I wouldn't. If they didn't comply, I'd take legal action myself. With no other choice. Emily finally recorded an apology video and uploaded it online. She cried pitifully in the clip, acting as if she were the real victim. A handful of netizens tried to shift the narrative in her favor, but I made sure those voices didn't gain traction. With Emily's public apology out in the open, Henry's family could no longer save face. His father, a well-known figure, suffered a blow to his reputation from the whole fiasco. But none of that had anything to do with me anymore. 9 months later, Aaron sent me another update. Emily had the baby, it's a girl. Then, after a pause, he added. 3 daughters in a row. Henry and his mom are pissed. On top of that, after the whole apology scandal, there's still resentment toward Emily. Henry's been keeping a college girl on the side. His dad was so furious, almost broke Henry's leg. Most of our classmates look down on Henry now. Seriously, in this day and age, what's wrong with having daughters? Emily gave up everything for him in college. I played the voice message, listening to the gossip without much interest. Aaron. You don't need to update me on this stuff anymore. I set my phone down and turned my gaze toward the balcony. Selena stood there, watering the plants, her silhouette framed by the golden afternoon light. I walked over and wrapped my arms around her, gently resting my hand on the curve of her growing belly. She turned her head and smiled at me. And in that moment, nothing else mattered.